Let me tell you something that nobody in your life has had the guts to say to your face. Most people are going to run out of money before they run out of time. That's not a scare tactic. That's arithmetic. And arithmetic doesn't care about your feelings, your excuses, or your good intentions. I've sat across from thousands of entrepreneurs, investors, and everyday people over the course of my career, and I can spot a financial disaster in the making within about 30 seconds. Not because I'm smarter than everyone else, but because I've seen the same trap spring shut on the same kinds of people over and over again, decade after decade. Retirement traps. The invisible kind, the ones that don't announce themselves until it's too late to escape. So before we go any further, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want you to answer this in the comments below. Be honest with yourself. If your income stopped today completely, how many months could you actually survive without touching a loan, a credit card, or borrowing from someone you know? Not years, months. Think about that number and write it down there, because your answer tells me everything about where you actually stand versus where you think you stand. Now let's get into it. 5 retirement traps. Real ones. The kind that are quietly destroying the financial futures of people who thought they were doing everything right. The first trap is the most seductive one, and that's why it kills the most people financially. It's the belief that your income is your wealth. I see this constantly. Someone earns $150,000 a year, drives a luxury car, lives in a beautiful home, takes 2 international vacations, and genuinely believes they are wealthy. They're not. They are performing wealth. There's a catastrophic difference. Income is a flow. Wealth is a reservoir. If the flow stops, and one day it always stops, what's left in the reservoir? For most high earners, the answer is almost nothing because they spent the flow as fast as it came in, sometimes faster. The average American household spends 97 cents of every dollar earned. 97 cents. That means the wealth building capacity of most households is operating at a margin of 3% or less. That's not a retirement strategy. That's financial survival with a nice aesthetic. Real wealth is built in the gap between what you earn and what you spend. Widen that gap aggressively and deploy the difference into assets that compound. That's it. That's the whole game. But most people never do it because they're too busy maintaining the appearance of having already won. The second trap is one I find particularly infuriating because it's driven entirely by misplaced trust. It's the trap of assuming your employer's retirement plan is enough. It is not. Full stop. A 401k match is not a retirement strategy. It's a starting point and a modest one at that. The average 401k balance for Americans between the ages of 55 and 64 is roughly $185,000. That sounds like a real number until you understand what it actually means in retirement income terms. If you apply a standard withdrawal rate, that $185,000 generates somewhere between $7,000 and $9,000 per year. That's not retirement, that's survival, and barely. People spend 30 years at a company, contribute dutifully to their plan, never look at their allocations, never diversify beyond the default fund options, and then they reach 65 and experience genuine shock at what they've actually accumulated. The system didn't fail them. They failed to engage with the system. There's a difference. I'm not interested in blaming employers or governments. I'm interested in you taking personal ownership of your retirement outcome because nobody is coming to save you. The sooner you internalize that, the better your decisions will become. The third trap is where I see even intelligent people go completely off the rails. It's the retirement timing illusion. Specifically, the belief that you'll know when the right time is to retire and that you can plan for it with reasonable precision. You cannot. Life is not a spreadsheet. I've watched people plan for a 65-year-old retirement with absolute confidence and then get hit with a health crisis at 58 or a corporate restructuring at 60. Or a family emergency that drains their reserves at 62. Suddenly, the plan they counted on for 30 years evaporates in 18 months. Here's the psychological trap inside the trap. When you defer your planning to a future version of yourself, you are making a bet that future you will have more time, more information, and more resources than present you. That bet loses the majority of the time. The correct approach is to build a retirement structure that can survive an early involuntary exit from the workforce. Assume you might have to stop working 5 years earlier than you planned. Design around that scenario. If it doesn't happen, wonderful, you're ahead. If it does, you survive. That's not pessimism. That's engineering, and I would rather be an engineer than a victim. The fourth trap is the one that nobody wants to talk about at dinner parties, and that's exactly why it's so dangerous. It's the healthcare cost blind spot. People plan their retirement budgets with meticulous attention to housing, food, travel, even entertainment, and then they leave healthcare as a vague line item, a rough estimate, a number they'll figure out later. Later is a catastrophic financial strategy. Fidelity estimates that the average 65-year-old couple will need approximately $315,000 in today's dollars just to cover healthcare costs throughout retirement. And that number doesn't include long-term care. Long-term care statistically is something that 70% of people over 65 will require at some point. The average cost of a private nursing home room in the United States currently exceeds $100,000 per year. Let that sink in. 1 year. And the average stay in long-term care is approximately 2.5 years. That's a $250,000 variable that most retirement plans treat as invisible. I'm not saying this to frighten you. I'm saying it because ignorance in this area is genuinely catastrophic. You must account for healthcare inflation, which historically outpaces general inflation significantly. You must understand your Medicare coverage and its gaps. You must seriously evaluate long-term care insurance, health savings accounts, and contingency reserves. The people who do this work in their 50s retire with confidence. The people who avoid it retire with anxiety, and they spend their final decades rationing the life they spent 40 years trying to build. The fifth trap is perhaps the most psychologically complex and, in my opinion, the most insidious. It's the identity trap. The moment when retirement itself becomes the enemy, not because of money, but because of meaning. I have watched financially successful people retire comfortably with everything in order and then fall apart within 2 years, not physically, emotionally, psychologically, existentially, because for 40 years their work was their identity, their title was their worth, their calendar was their purpose, and then one day it just stops, and they don't know who they are without it. Research from Harvard Medical School and various longitudinal aging studies is unambiguous on this point. Social connection, purpose, and cognitive engagement are not lifestyle luxuries in retirement. They are medical necessities. Social isolation in retirement increases the risk of cognitive decline, depression, and early mortality significantly. The numbers are serious. Chronic loneliness is estimated to have the health equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes per day. 15 cigarettes. And yet most retirement planning conversations involve zero discussion of what you're retiring to. Everyone focuses on the money, the assets, the income, the drawdown strategy. Almost nobody asks the more important question, what does your Tuesday look like at 10 a.m. in 5 years? I build businesses. I invest in companies. I think in terms of structured systems. And I'm telling you that your post-retirement life requires a business plan as much as your financial life does. What are you producing? What are you contributing? Who are you serving? Who is counting on you? These are not soft questions. These are the questions that determine whether your retirement is a reward or a slow decline. Money preserves the body. Purpose preserves the mind. You need both. Now let me bring this back to where we started because I want to leave you with something concrete, not something inspirational. Inspiration fades. Systems endure. The 5 traps I just described, confusing income with wealth, outsourcing your retirement to an employer plan, betting on perfect timing, ignoring healthcare costs, and neglecting the architecture of purpose. These aren't exotic problems that happen to other people. They are the default outcome for people who don't deliberately design an alternative, and most people don't, because designing an alternative requires confronting uncomfortable numbers, making difficult trade-offs, and accepting that the future will not automatically be better than the present just because you want it to be. I didn't build what I built by hoping things would work out. I built it by being ruthlessly honest about where I was, where I needed to be, and what the distance between those 2 points actually required. That same discipline is available to you. It doesn't require genius. It requires honesty and consistency, applied early enough to matter. Here is my challenge to you. Take the 5 traps I've outlined and honestly audit your current position against each one. Not your intended position, not your planned position, your actual, present-day, honest position. Write it down. Make it concrete. Because vague financial anxiety and concrete financial problems require completely different responses, and most people are responding emotionally to something they've never actually measured. The gap between where most people end up financially and where they could have ended up is almost never explained by income. It's almost always explained by decisions. Decisions made early. Decisions made consistently. Decisions made with clear eyes rather than comfortable illusions. You are capable of making better decisions, starting right now. The question is whether you will. Go back to the comments and tell me which of these 5 traps is the one you know right now that you need to address most urgently. I read these. I want to know where you actually are, because that's where any real conversation about money has to start, with the truth.